850 Tomahawk cruise missiles, 3 carrier strike groups, 13,000 military targets flattened in 30 days of relentless bombing. This was the most intense naval operation since World War II. Yet, along the mere 2-1 nautical mile stretch of the Strait of Hormuz, everything remained still. Not a single oil tank left port, not a single warship dared to pass through. The absolute firepower of the United States was facing a harsh reality. You cannot open a strait by destroying it. For the past month, the world has been preoccupied with a single question. Will the US Marines land in Iran? But that's the wrong question. It ignores a deeper nature of modern warfare. The right question we should be asking is, why can't a fleet with enough firepower to destroy an entire nation forge its own 9-kilometer long passage? Welcome to the Navy Codex. Today, we're not predicting when the bombs will fall. We're deciphering a system equation where firepower is a weak variable against the power of geography, physics, and the persistence of minefields. We'll understand why 150,000 troops on paper become an inescapable geometric trap. To understand why American firepower is paralyzed, we must start with a number: 21 nautical miles. That's the narrowest width of the Strait of Hormuz. To a tourist, it's a vast expanse of sea, but to a naval strategist, it's not a sea. It's a geometric trap with no margin of error. 21 nautical miles, equivalent to 39 kilometers, meaning if you stand in the middle of the strait, you're less than 20 kilometers from Iranian territory. You can't hide here. There's no vast ocean to maneuver or hide in. Every billion-dollar warship, from supercarriers to Aegis destroyers, entering is like a heavyweight boxer squeezed into a narrow corridor only 2 meters wide. Your strength is no longer about how hard you punch, but whether you have enough space to dodge. Hormuz is not an open battlefield. It's a controlled corridor. Here, geography has deprived the US Navy of its most powerful weapon, distance. Even worse, international maritime law mandates that transport ships follow specific lanes. You can't deviate from them because of minefields and coral reefs. The result? The entire world's vital shipping lanes are within range of every weapon Iran possesses, from inexpensive rapid-fire cannons to the most advanced cruise missile systems. When a ship enters this lane, it's no longer a hunter. It's prey moving on a predetermined track, awaiting a prearranged scenario. But if geography is merely the framework of the trap, what is really holding the trigger? If not, Iran's massive warships partially sunk by 850 Tomahawk missiles. What is preventing the Americans from crossing this line? Why couldn't 850 Tomahawk missiles open the Hormuz? The answer lies here. You're attacking targets, while Iran is defending with a system. The Hormuz isn't locked down by a fleet of warships you can see and sink. It's locked down by 3 layers of entities that long-range firepower is almost powerless against. The first layer, the delay system, over 5,000 sea mines. They don't need radar, they don't need remote detonators, and most importantly, they don't emit heat signatures for Tomahawk missiles to locate. They lie there, invisible and patient. A $500 mine can tear through the hull of a $13 billion supercarrier. To clear them, you need minesweepers. But minesweepers move at the speed of a pedestrian, turning them into shooting targets for the second layer of defense. The second layer, control nodes. These are the fortified islands, Abu Musa, Larak, and Keshem. The Iranians call them unsinkable aircraft carriers. You can bomb the surface, but deep inside the limestone mountains are missile cities with a network of fortified caves. This is the Tomahawk's dead end. The cruise missile can destroy a fixed radar, but it cannot seize an island. As long as Iranian troops are on these rocky outcrops, they control everything that moves underwater. A coastal gun positioned in a cave has more strategic value than a squadron of destroyers at sea. And the final layer, the kill system. a combination of coastal cruise missiles and a network of underground bunkers. This is where reaction math begins to punish the US Navy. Mobile launchers are only visible for 90 seconds to fire. Meanwhile, a Tomahawk missile launched from offshore takes an average of 5 to 8 minutes to reach its target. By the time the Tomahawk hits the ground, Iran's launch platform has long since been firmly embedded deep within the mountain. The result? The US spent millions of dollars to create bomb craters in inanimate rock. It's the tragedy of pure power. You can't sink something that isn't a ship. But even when US radar detects incoming missiles, why do the world's most advanced Aegis defense systems consistently fail to intercept them? The answer lies not in computer software, but in a law of physics that no technology can bend. In military circles, there's a famous saying, you can't hit something you can't see. The US Navy possesses the Aegis system, an electronic brain capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously. But at Hormuz, Aegis is facing an uncompromising enemy, the curvature of the Earth. Look at Iran's Noor missile. It didn't choose a direct confrontation high in the sky. It opted for sea skimming, flying close to the water's surface, at an altitude of only 5 to 10 meters. At this altitude, the missile is hidden below the radar horizon. Radar waves from the destroyer travel straight into the air while the killer stealthily creeps beneath those waves. This is the mathematics of death. Due to the curvature of the ocean's surface, a destroyer's radar can only detect a low-flying target when it's about 15 nautical miles from the ship. With the Noor missile's subsonic speed, this means the ship's crew has only 20 seconds to react. 20 seconds for the computer system to identify the target, 20 seconds to make the interception decision, and 20 seconds for the anti-aircraft missile to leave its launch pad. In the suffocating combat environment of Hormuz, 20 seconds is not a matter of time. It's a death sentence. Not because the American radar is weak, but because physics doesn't allow it to be any stronger. And let's not forget the terrain. Iran's limestone islands are not just fortresses, they are also electronic broken mirrors. Radar waves bounce off the rocks and create thousands of false signals, forming a maze of interference that overloads the fleet's AI brains. While Aegis is busy filtering signals between the cliffs, the Iranian launch pad has already completed its mission, appears, fires, and disappears into its underground silo. A perfectly executed attack cycle rendered the previous 850 Tomahawk missiles seem like punches to the air. The Americans could destroy fixed silos with GBU, 7.2 ground-penetrating bombs, but they couldn't hunt down the mobile ghosts inside the mountains with cruise missiles. At Hormuz, the superpower's technological advantage was being eroded by the fundamental limitations of physics and the cunning of geography. If long-range firepower had reached its limit, and billion-dollar missiles still couldn't clear the minefields or hidden launch sites, what was the solution? Why did the Americans accept waiting 30 days of fruitless bombing before unleashing their real weapon? People often look at the explosions and believe that the war is over. But at Hormuz, the reality was far more brutal. After 850 missiles, the US Navy realized a grim truth. Firepower can destroy a target, but it cannot establish control. Look at the minesweepers. They are the most isolated and vulnerable entities in this equation. To open the strait, you have to clear the mines. To clear the mines, minesweepers have to move at the speed of a pedestrian, less than 5 knots. In that state, they are nothing more than stationary prey to coastal gun emplacements and shoulder-fired missiles hidden in rocky crevices. A Tomahawk can destroy thousands of silos, but it cannot protect a ship navigating through a minefield 24 hours a day. Cruise missiles create craters. It can turn one launch pad into scrap metal, but it can't stop the enemy from pulling another out of the next hatch. Firepower is a tool of negation. It says, the target shouldn't exist, but control is an affirmation. To open the strait, you don't just need to destroy the enemy's weapons. You need to seize the rocky outcrops that are aiming at the channel. You need a physical presence, to ensure that no Iranian crew can emerge from the underground bunker. This is the ultimate limit of the Navy. A billion-dollar destroyer can't climb a mountain to plant a flag, and a $1 million missile can't perform a guard duty. Firepower is just the prelude. Missiles create craters, but they don't create control. To change the Hormuz equation, the Americans need an entity that can survive inside the trap, not just attack from the outside. And that is why, after 30 days of intense bombing, the strait remains locked down. The Navy has done its part well. They have stripped away Iran's outer armor. But to penetrate the vulnerable point, the fleet needs another key. A force that doesn't fight like a warship and doesn't approach its target like a missile. If the Navy has reached its physical limits, then why are the Marines, a force famous for its bloody amphibious landings, considered the solution when the Sea of Hormuz is heavily mined and riddled with anti-ship missiles? Are they embarking on a collective suicide mission, or do they possess a tool that can break all the rules of Iran's defense system? When long-range firepower reached a stalemate, the US Central Command realized they were playing the wrong game. You can't use a sledgehammer to unlock a sensitive lock. To tackle Hormuz, the Navy didn't need more missiles. They needed boots on the ground. Why the Marines? Because the Hormuz battlefield had changed in nature. It was no longer a simple sea control battle. It had become a land control battle. To open the sea, you had to control the land. The limestone outcrops that 850 missiles couldn't conquer now had to be tackled with the breath, footsteps, and guns of the Marines. The Marines' mission in Hormuz wasn't to conquer all of Iran. Their mission was to unlock the system. Imagine the fortified islands as security cameras pointed at the shipping lanes. American missiles attempted to shatter the remote range cameras, but failed. Marines were sent in to manually blind those cameras. Only when the Marines secured the high ground, neutralizing the underground combat crews with grenades and bayonets, could the minesweepers operate freely. The Marines didn't appear to replace the warships. They appeared to unlock them. This was a shift from destruction to capture, from bomb craters to control. In the equation of the Strait of Hormuz, the Navy creates the void, but the Marines fill that void with a physical presence. For the first time in 30 days, Iran's advantage was shaken. Their defenses were built to counter massive surface ships, not to counter small, elite groups appearing from unexpected directions. But a bigger question arises. Why did the Americans accept dropping 850 missiles and wait a grueling 30 days before deploying the Marines? Why not land on the very first day to end the war in 24 hours? The answer doesn't lie in the general's slowness, but in a harsh rule of modern warfare. Landing on the first day is suicide. Landing on the 30th day is art. What happened in the shadows of those 30 days of bombing to pave the way for the Marines' arrival? Many might mistake the 30 days of bombing for Washington's hesitation. But in military mathematics, those 30 days weren't a wait. They were a prerequisite, a life or death condition. Imagine if the Marines landed on the first day. Iran's air defenses were still intact, radars still scanning intensely, and SAM launchers still waiting. Landing at that point wouldn't be an operation. It would be collective suicide. The hundreds of millions of dollars Ospreys would be torn apart before they even saw the beach. For the Marines to set foot on land, the Navy had to accomplish a devastating task: flatten all electronic barriers. Those 30 days were a process of peeling away the system. The Tomahawk missiles and F-35 stealth fighters didn't appear to open the strait. They appeared to destroy Iran's ability to see and resist. It took 4 weeks to ensure that all long-range surveillance radars were blinded and all S-300 or Bavar 373 anti-aircraft missile batteries were neutralized. This is the harsh reality of modern warfare. You can't make step 10 without completing step 1. The landing is the final chapter of a book, not the introduction. Only when the skies over Hormuz become the playground of the US Air Force do the Marines' boots have the right to appear. In the art of systems warfare, a landing on the first day is suicide. A landing on the 30th day imposes a predetermined outcome. The US accepted the expenditure of billions of dollars in ammunition over 30 days for only one thing: the safety of the landing crew. Now, with the shell crumbling, the fleet unleashes its final card. But the Marines of 2026 will not attack Hormuz the way their forefathers did at Normandy or Incheon. They will not advance from the sea where 5,000 mines await. So, if not by ship and not by beach, how can 5,000 Marines overcome thousands of mines and Iran's dense coastal defenses without a single casualty? The secret lies in a machine capable of defying all laws of space and time. For 40 years, Iran has been preparing for an underwater war. They laid 5,000 mines, built hundreds of anti-ship missile launchers, and trained squadrons of suicide boats. Their logic was simple: if you block the sea, you block the landing. But the US Marines arriving in Hormuz in 2026 aren't going by sea. They're using a terrain hacker called the MV-22 Osprey. This isn't a helicopter, nor is it a fixed-wing aircraft. It's a hybrid entity, born to render any ground-based deterrence efforts meaningless. Look at the math of superiority. Iran's most common shoulder-fired air defense systems have an effective range of less than 11,000 feet. The Osprey, meanwhile, makes its approach flight at 15,000 feet. It doesn't go through the minefields, it flies straight over them. It didn't evade anti-ship missiles, because anti-ship missiles can't hit a high-flying target like a transport plane. The Osprey boasts a speed of 270 knots, allowing it to shorten the enemy's reaction window from 15 minutes to less than 4 minutes. In war, that 1 minute difference is the line between a successful landing and a bloody tragedy. The Osprey didn't destroy Iran's defenses. It bypassed them. It rendered 5,000 underwater mines useless decorations and turned billions of dollars worth of anti-ship missiles into bystanders in its own battle. In just 12 seconds, the Osprey switched its engines from long-range flight to vertical landing. It could land troops on sheer cliffs, places Iran never considered for defense because there are no beaches. The war changed completely. Iran built a fortress to defend against ships, but their enemy came from the sky, landing right on top of that fortress and seizing control of the strait before an anti-ship shot could be fired. But no matter how modern the Ospreys were, the Marines only numbered 5,000. On the other side of the line were 150,000 enraged Iranian troops. What could 5,000 men do against a sea of 30 times their size? Or was this another miscalculation by the Pentagon? 150,000 against 5,000. On the brains of amateur observers, this was a predetermined massacre. The 150,000 Iranian Revolutionary Guard troops looked like a giant phantom looming over the strait. But in the mathematics of real-world warfare, that number was an illusion. Why? Because Iran was facing the curse of the defender. They had to be everywhere, while the Marines only needed to be in one place. Let's do a basic calculation. 150,000 troops had to be spread out to protect thousands of miles of coastline, defend the capital, and guard 7 isolated islands. They didn't know where the Americans would land: Abu Musa, Larak, or right at Bandar Abbas port. This spread-out defense negated the numerical advantage. Meanwhile, the 5,000 Marines on the landing ships were a concentrated fist. Thanks to the Osprey's speed, they could choose any weak point in Iran to attack. What was the result? At the point of contact, 550 elite Marines faced 300 local garrison troops. The 3-0-1 equation on the map suddenly reversed to a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of the Americans on the battlefield. It wasn't mere bravery, it was tactical geometry. The attacker chooses the point and concentrates its power. The defender is forced to spread thin and wait helplessly. Once the Marines had landed on the island, mathematics once again punished Iran. With its radar network flattened 30 days earlier and its surface fleet submerged, the Iranian units on the island were completely isolated. No reinforcements, no retreat, 150,000 troops on the mainland could only watch as their comrades were devoured by a much smaller but more mobile force. In modern warfare, power doesn't belong to the one with more troops. It belongs to the one with a higher power density at the critical point. But put yourself in the enemy's shoes. If you were an Iranian commander, seeing your 40-year-old system being dismantled layer by layer, and seeing the Marines gradually taking over the eyes of the sea on the islands, what would you do? Is there still a hidden trump card lurking in the murky waters of the Gulf, yet to be revealed? Forget the numbers from Washington for a moment. Now, put yourself in the shoes of an Iranian commander right now. You're standing in a fortified cave beneath Keshem Island. Above you, 30 days of American bombing have reduced every radar station to scrap metal. Your screen is black. You have no eyes, you don't know where the American fleet is. The only thing you have is a flickering radio and a report from your guard. Osprey is coming. What would you do? You have 150,000 troops on the mainland, but the strait is being cut off by the guns of the US Navy. You can't send reinforcements because the supply ships would be sunk the moment they leave port. What is your decision? Split your forces to hold all 7 islands? If so, each place would only have a few dozen men. They'd be wiped out by the Marines in 15 minutes. Or would you concentrate your forces on the largest island, Keshem? If so, you'll lose Abu Musa and Larak, leaving an open corridor for American minesweepers to enter. In this strategic go game, every move you make leads to a single outcome: isolation. This is when you realize you didn't lose because your soldiers lacked courage. You lost because you were up against an evolving system. You built a fortress to block warships, but your opponent brought in a force that could penetrate your walls. The stalemate you're experiencing is the success of Operation Epic Fury. When your opponent takes away your network connectivity, they not only destroy your weapons, they destroy your will to command. You can't be everywhere at once, and the Americans are just waiting for that. In war simulations, defeat doesn't come from being completely annihilated. It comes from having no viable options left to turn the tide. This simulated scenario ends here, but the reality out there continues. 850 Tomahawk missiles couldn't breach Hormuz, but they created a defensive vacuum, which 5,000 Marines then stepped into and filled. So, after all the enormous geographical, physical, and mathematical variables, what will the final equation of Hormuz give us regarding world stability? Let's go back to the initial 850 missiles. If we synthesize all the lessons from Hormuz, does the real power lie in the explosions themselves, or in some other invisible force that the US fleet has just reestablished? 850 Tomahawk missiles couldn't break through the Hormuz Strait, but they taught us a costly lesson about the nature of maritime power in the 21st century. War is no longer a gunfight between isolated individuals. It's a systems problem. At Hormuz, American firepower hit a wall of geography and the limits of physics. It took 30 days of relentless bombing and the appearance of boots from the sky for this deadlock equation to be solved. Ultimately, the true strength of a superpower doesn't lie in its ability to completely destroy its opponent. It lies in its ability to decipher complex systems and restore balance when the world is on the brink of collapse. Smart defense isn't about firing the most missiles, but about knowing how to control conflict with the subtlety of strategic thinking. But as the Hormuz Strait was loosened, another dark shadow was growing on the other side of the ocean. If Hormuz was a geometric trap of rocky mountains and underground tunnels, then in Malacca, the Americans will face an entirely different labyrinth where even stealth technology pales in comparison to dense jungles and thousands of unnamed islands. Hormuz has opened, but Malacca is closing. Are you ready for the next challenge? Don't forget to subscribe to Navy Codex to join us in deciphering the Achilles heel of maritime power. See you in the next report.